Ink Demon is the overarching antagonist of the Bendy series, and has quite the interesting story. Joey Drew wanted to make his cartoon characters real, so he hired the Gent Corporation to create the ink machine, which, using Gent's special ink, would produce living characters. One of the first attempts with the ink machine resulted in the creation of the Ink Demon. He was made as an attempt to create Bendy, but he came out strange, and since then they didn't attempt to create Bendy again. Joey Drew ordered that Thomas Connor kept the Ink Demon locked up tight, and they came to the conclusion that the reason the Ink Demon was so strange was because he lacked a human soul. After this, almost all of the Ink Machine's creations used human souls from Joey Drew Studios' employees. Eventually, Joey Drew Studios closed, and all the creatures born from the Ink Machine ended up trapped in the cartoon cycle that the Ink Machine had also created. Inside the cycle, the Ink Demon is seemingly invincible, unable to be hurt by normal weapons, and he has immense power. The souls in the cycle either feared or worshipped the Ink Demon. People like Sammy believed he could set them free. Sometime before bending the Ink Machine, it's implied that the Ink Demon attacked Alice Angel, resulting in her deformed face.
I will not let the demon touch me again. I'm so close now. So almost perfect.
In Boris and the Dark Survival, which is being rebranded as Bendy Lone Wolf, the Ink Demon hunts Boris as he searches for supplies across the studio. Later in Bending the Ink Machine, the ink replica of Henry activates the Ink Machine inside the cycle, which gets the Ink Demon's attention. As Henry is returning to the Ink Machine, the Ink Demon can be heard crawling in the air ducts. When Henry returns to the Ink Machine, he's attacked by the Ink Demon and flees. In Chapter 2, Henry encounters one of the Ink Demon's followers, Sammy Lawrence, who tries to sacrifice Henry to the Ink Demon to appease him. However, the Ink Demon kills Sammy instead. Henry then escapes the ritual, but the Ink Demon cuts his escape short and chases him until Henry can get to safety. Chapter 3 is by far the Ink Demon's biggest appearance in the game. Henry is tasked by Alice Angel to retrieve supplies for her across the studio, and the Ink Demon will appear randomly. If the Ink Demon spots Henry, he'll chase after him, and Henry will have to hide in order to evade him. Later in Chapter 4, when Henry is trying to rescue Boris from Alice Angel, he travels through the vents. Later, Henry is chased by the projectionist and hides, but the projectionist seems to notice him. In a pretty surprising twist, the Ink Demon appears and attacks the projectionist, then quickly decapitates him. The Ink Demon seems to notice Henry hiding, but takes away the projectionist's body to feast on it. In the final chapter of the game, Henry keeps seeing hidden messages telling him to find something in the film vault, but by the time he gets there, the Ink Demon has already taken it. After searching the film vault, Henry, Allison, and Tom encounter the Ink Demon, but manage to avoid his detection. They then find the Ink Demon's lair, a giant version of the Ink Machine at the bottom of the studio, a fitting lair for the monster born from the Ink Machine. When Henry goes inside, he finds the Ink Demon's throne, surrounded by projectors playing the Bendy cartoons, and an audio log from Joey Drew.
It's simply awe-inspiring what one can accomplish with their own hands. A lump of clay can turn to meaning if you strangle it with enough enthusiasm. Look what we've built. We created life itself, Henry. Not just on a silver screen, but in the hearts of those we entertain with our fancy moving pictures. But when the tickets stopped selling, when the next big thing came along, only the monsters remained. Shadows of the past. But you can save them, Henry. You can peel it all away. You see, there's only one thing Bendy has never known. He was there for his beginning, but he's never seen the end.
The end.
The Ink Demon's cartoon facade has been pulled away to reveal the demon within, and he becomes Beast Bendy. Beast Bendy tries to charge into Henry as he navigates his way through the machine. Eventually, Henry makes his way back to the Ink Demon's throne, and uses the end reel to kill the Ink Demon. After killing the Ink Demon, Henry is sent to Joey Drew's apartment in the real world. Joey Drew shortly talks to Henry, before sending him back to the beginning of Chapter 1, and the cycle restarts all over again. In the post-credits scene of the game, we can see the real-world Ink Machine in Joey Drew's apartment. The next game, Bendy and the Dark Revival, marks a big change for the Ink Demon in a lot of different ways. After the events of Bendy and the Ink Machine, Joey Drew dies, and his old friend Nathan Arch revives the Bendy brand. Nathan collects all of Joey's Bendy stuff from his apartment, including the Ink Machine. Nathan's son Wilson notices the Ink Machine being delivered to Archgate Pictures, and he begins to investigate its secrets. Using the Ink Machine, Wilson enters Joey's cartoon cycle from Bendy and the Ink Machine, and begins tampering with the cycle's events and holding it in place. According to the archives, this resulted in the Ink Demon evolving. He almost entirely loses the Bendy appearance and takes on a much more monstrous form. However, Wilson wants to take over the cycle, and the Ink Demon is the biggest obstacle in his path. Eventually, Wilson manages to capture the Ink Demon, using his creations known as the Keepers. The Keepers attempt to kill the Ink Demon, but aren't able to successfully terminate him. To nullify the Ink Demon's powers, the Keepers transform him into the smaller form of Bendy. Bendy is a personality more like his cartoon appearance, and he displays much more emotion than the Ink Demon does. Months later, when the events of the game take place, Wilson brings Audrey Drew into the cycle. During some of Audrey's first moments in the cycle, we hear what Wilson has been telling everyone else about the Ink Demon's disappearance.
For 211 days, you've lived without the Ink Demon haunting your steps. I banished him away, tore his body in two.
Towards the end of the first chapter, Audrey encounters Bendy. She reaches out to hold his hand, but her ink powers zap him, unknowingly freeing the Ink Demon from his prison. When searching around Animation Alley, the Ink Demon introduces himself with a brand new voice. The Ink Demon then pursues Audrey throughout the game. Outside of randomized attacks, the Ink Demon appears a couple of times throughout the story. In Chapter 2, when making her way through Artist's Rest, Audrey encounters the Ink Demon eating a lost one's body. And the Ink Demon slowly pursues her, but luckily she manages to escape. In Chapter 3, when Audrey heads to the elevator, she finds the Ink Demon, but she's able to hide from him. Shortly after, Audrey finds Bendy and follows him into the sewers. Eventually, Audrey makes her way to the city and finds Bendy once again, but this time she gains his trust, and in Chapter 4 they explore the city together. However, Audrey is separated from Bendy, but continues onward to the Gent workshop. Before she can enter, the Ink Demon appears. The Ink Demon goes to attack Audrey, but Wilson's signal towers activate and turn the Ink Demon back into Bendy. Inside the Gent workshop, Audrey finds audio logs relating to the Ink Demon's capture and his transformation into Bendy. In Chapter 5, when Audrey decides to help Wilson kill the Ink Demon, he explains things to her more clearly.
You never actually killed the Ink Demon, did you?
No, he's too powerful to destroy. So we sealed him away, trapped him in a different form. One that was smaller, harmless.
Bendy.
It was a fitting prison. Although he seems to have found a way to free himself.
At the end of the game, Wilson reveals his plan to create a new cartoon god for the cycle in order to overthrow the Ink Demon.
Isn't he beautiful? Simple but elegant. A treasure. Powerful beyond anyone. The Ink Demon will fall, and we can have peace. At last your purpose is revealed, Audrey. This is why you're here. With your soul inside him, my creation will live forever.
Audrey manages to fight Wilson off and kill him, but in the process he's turned into Ship-Ahoy Dudley. Ship-Ahoy Dudley nearly kills Audrey, but the Ink Demon appears and fights him. With Wilson dead, the Ink Demon turns his attention back to Audrey.
And give
Audrey and the Ink Demon merge together to form Beast Bendy. Memory Joey appears to help Audrey and gives her the end reel from Bendy and the Ink Machine.
Your words are wasted. The failure of Joey Drew dies here. Just a pencil and a dream isn't enough. You have to have heart.
The Ink Demon killing Joey Drew gives Audrey the strength to take control of Beast Bendy's body. And in the final act of the game, the player controls Beast Bendy and goes on a rampage. Beast Bendy has an improved model, and unlike in Bendy and the Ink Machine, he has fully formed legs. All of Audrey's allies, and even Henry from Bendy and the Ink Machine, come to Audrey's rescue. And together they manage to play the end, defeating the Ink Demon once again and resetting the cycle. After the cycle is reset, Audrey returns to the real world, accompanied by Bendy, implying that the Ink Demon has once again been repressed into the Bendy form.
So, what's next? Who can really say?
Alice Angel is the twisted and sadistic queen of the studio, and a main antagonist throughout the Bendy series. Before becoming an Ink creature, Alice Angel was a voice actress named Susie Campbell. Susie worked at Joey Drew Studios, voicing all sorts of characters, but eventually she was cast as Alice Angel. Susie was very attached to Alice and overjoyed to be her voice actress. Joey Drew further added to Susie's joy when he called her Alice at lunch, which Susie liked. Susie recorded her voice lines in the music department and worked closely with the music department's director, Sammy Lawrence. It's implied that during this time, Susie had a romantic relationship with Sammy Lawrence.
I heard her talking to Sammy the other day. If I'd know better, I'd say there was magic there.
However, Joey Drew recast Alice without telling Susie, and replaced her with Allison Pendle. This threw Susie into a state of despair. She seems very delusional during this time, clearly not in the right state of mind, and Joey uses this to his advantage.
Now he wants to meet again tomorrow? Says he has an opportunity for me?
Joey convinced Susie to become a test subject in the Ink Machine's experiments to become a real version of Alice Angel. However, Susie being reborn through the Ink Machine didn't go as intended.
First time I was born from its inky womb, I was a wiggling, pulsing, shapeless slug. The second time, well, it made me an angel.
Sometime around this, Alice was moved from the real world to the cartoon cycle created by the Ink Machine. It also seems like the Ink Demon attacked Alice Angel, resulting in her becoming deformed.
I will not let the demon touch me again. I'm so close now. So almost perfect.
To become beautiful again, Alice started mutilating characters in the cycle and stealing parts from them to fix herself. Boris's can be found gutted across the cycle. They're what remains of these poor souls after Alice took what she wanted from them. In Boris and the Dark Survival, which is currently being rebranded as Bendy, Lone Wolf, Alice Angel leaves audio logs for Boris inside these gutted bodies. In these audio logs, Alice pretends to be a woman named Mila who is trapped inside the cycle. Boris eventually manages to unlock the door leading to where she's supposedly trapped, but instead he finds Alice Angel. Boris escapes Alice, and she continues to pursue him across the studio. In Bendy and the Ink Machine Chapter 1, when Henry's exploring the cycle, he finds a gutted Boris, and wrongfully assumes that Joey did this.
Oh my god. Joey, what were you doing?
Using the seeing tool reveals a message that confirms this was Alice's doing. In Chapter 3, when Henry and Boris are exploring Heavenly Toys, they encounter Alice Angel. Alice tells Henry to meet her on level 9, where he finds a room full of corpses that Alice has taken parts from.
Look around. It took so many of them to make me so beautiful. Anything less than perfect was left behind.
Alice instructs Henry to collect supplies for her, and in return she'll let him leave the studio. Alice talks to Henry during these objectives and is very impatient and cruel. Later in the chapter, Alice commands Henry to break the Bendy cutouts across the studio, showing how Alice and the Ink Demon are rivals. When Henry is sent down to level 14, Alice sends him a Tommy gun, saying it once belonged to someone very special. We never learn who this belonged to, but it's likely it was Sammy's, since he was close with Susie. When Henry enters the elevator to leave the studio, Alice backstabs him and drops the elevator, saying she needs Boris to be beautiful again.
Now come down and bring me back my Boris! It's the most perfect Boris I've ever seen, and I want it! I need it. I need it inside, so I can be beautiful again!
The elevator crashes and the chapter ends with Alice dragging Boris away. In Chapter 4, Henry sets out to save Boris from Alice Angel. Early in the chapter, when Henry's climbing up the staircase, Alice briefly talks to him.
Better hurry, errand boy. Boris is having trouble staying in one piece.
Later, while playing carnival games, Alice taunts Henry again.
Tell me, are you having fun? I'm sure Boris doesn't mind waiting for his rescue party.
Eventually, Henry powers up the haunted house. He goes inside to find Boris, and Alice monologues to him.
We never really had control of the studio. Either you were in someone's pocket, or you were putting someone into yours.
At the end of the ride, Henry is reunited with Boris.
Boris! No, what has she done to you?
In a scene that broke many fans' hearts, Alice has gutted Boris and transformed him into a monster. It's an incredibly cruel fate for such a friendly character, and shows how twisted Alice is. Henry manages to defeat brute Boris, and Alice Angel runs out to kill Henry, but she's abruptly stabbed by Alice and Angel and dies. Chapter 4's original credits ended with an image showing the lost ones surrounding Alice's corpse. After Bendy and the Ink Machine, Joey Drew dies, and the real-world ink machine that created the cartoon cycles collected by Archgate Pictures, the company that now owns the Bendy brand. Wilson begins investigating the ink machine and tampers with the cycle during another one of its loops. Wilson severely disrupts the cycle. As seen in Dark Revival, Alice Angel and Boris the Wolf are still alive due to Wilson changing the cycle's events. Alice Angel is captured by Wilson's creations known as the Keepers, and locked away in the Cycle Breaker's prison. It's never clearly stated what a Cycle Breaker is, but judging from the main cast of Bendy and the Ink Machine all being in the prison, it's likely a Cycle Breaker is just someone who plays an important role in the Cycle's story. Alice was likely imprisoned due to her major role as an antagonist in Bendy and the Ink Machine, so capturing her would disrupt the Cycle's events. When Audrey goes to Cycle Breaker's prison in Chapter 4 of Bendy and the Dark Revival, we see Alice's cell is empty, implying she's escaped. In Chapter 5, when Audrey is in Wilson's retreat, Alice poisons her drink and knocks her out. When Audrey wakes up, she's in the north wing of Wilson's retreat, which Alice has taken over. Alice wants to harvest Audrey to make herself perfect.
What I want is your face removed, your skin peeled away like paper, and your insides torn out and tossed onto my table. Custom parts, ready for my delicious harvest.
But Alice puts that off and instead plays a riddle with Audrey. If Audrey gets the riddle right, she gets to go, but if she gets it wrong, she's electrocuted. Alice Angel seems to be a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's, since the riddle's answer is a reference to the original characters. Once Audrey completes the riddle, Alice doesn't let her go so easy.
No one humiliates an angel. No one. Now hold still, honey. This is gonna hurt.
Alice Angel tries to shoot Audrey as she attempts to open the doorway leading to Alice. Audrey reaches Alice, but she's caught before she can banish her. She nearly kills Audrey, but is once again stabbed by Alice and Angel.
My face. You have my face. It's our face. I'm beautiful. Always were.
This is the last time we see Alice in the games, but we may see her in Bendy the Cage. Alice Angel's a great antagonist and a widely loved character. It's crazy to think that what started out as a small poster in Chapter 2 has been expanded into such an interesting character. Seeing Alice's story play out over the years has been an amazing experience, and I'm hoping there's even more in the future. Boris the Wolf is a main character throughout the Bendy series. Boris was a cartoon character at Joey Drew Studios and was very likely created by Henry Stein before he left the company. Boris appeared in many cartoons, and he was one of the big three characters at the studio. Joey Drew had the Gent Corporation make the Ink Machine, which would produce living cartoon characters. The first Ink Machine attempt created the Ink Demon, a twisted monster made in Bendy's image. After this, Joey decided the Ink Machine's creations needed human souls. The machine created many Borises, but there's not many left. However, it's never clearly stated in the games whose soul was used to create the main Boris in the series. A popular fan theory was that Boris was Wally Franks, the former janitor at Joey Drew Studios. However, Bendy and the Ink Machine Chapter 5 confirms he's still alive, so that's not the case. In the Dreams Come to Life book, the main character Buddy becomes Boris the Wolf. However, those books are non-canon, but some still believe that Buddy is Boris due to multiple references to Buddy. Regardless, Boris is a very goofy and fearful character, but a reliable friend. We'll see more of that when we cover Bendy and the Ink Machine. Boris is one of the many inhabitants in the Cycle, a reality that Joey created using the machine. Joey used the Cycle to torment his own version of Henry Stein. There are many Borises in the cycle. Most of them have been gutted by Alice Angel, but there's another living Boris clone named Tom. I have videos about Tom and Alice if you're interested in learning more about them. Boris is the protagonist in Boris in the Dark Survival, which is getting a major update that will rebrand the game as Bendy Lone Wolf. In this game, Boris searches for supplies across the studio while evading the monsters hunting him down. The Ink Demon is one of the many creatures that's after Boris. I made a video about the Ink Demon if you're interested in learning about his story. Despite being a simple game, Dark Survival has multiple endings and story moments. Across the studio, Boris collects paper scraps and uses them to create art representing his former self. Interacting with this triggers one of the game's endings. There are also tapes in the gutted Boris clones that tell the story of a woman named Mila, who's trapped and needs Boris to save her. When Boris finds Mila, it's revealed that she's actually Alice Angel, who lied about Mila to lure Boris to his doom. Boris runs and manages to escape her. In the Unleashed update, Boris finds keys across the studio and opens a cage, which releases the Butcher Gang, who he continues to encounter throughout the studio. If Boris collects enough ink hearts, he can also encounter the Projectionist. Boris in the Dark Survival will have a proper story conclusion when the Lone Wolf update releases. If you're interested in the upcoming Lone Wolf update, I made a video discussing it. In Bendy the Ink Machine, the ink replica of Henry meets Boris at the end of Chapter 2. Boris lets Henry stay at his safe house and the two become friends. Later in Chapter 3, Henry decides to continue his quest to escape the studio, but Boris doesn't let him go until Henry makes him some lunch. After Henry makes Boris some bacon soup, Boris gives Henry the lever to leave the safe house and proceeds to entirely ignore the meal Henry just made him. Henry leaves the safe house and Boris joins him. Henry travels through the darkness and keeps the light near Boris so he doesn't get scared. Eventually they're stopped by a closed door. Henry gives Boris the light and he crawls through the vent, then opens the door. Henry continues alone and is jump scared by a Bendy cutout, but it turns out it was just Boris playing a prank on Henry. Boris gives Henry a gent pipe so he can defend himself, but it can also be used to hit Boris. Henry and Boris find another dead end, and they throw two levers at the same time to open the door. They both enter the elevator and meet Alice Angel on level 9. Boris rushes into Alice's lair and finds a room full of gutted and dismembered corpses. Alice tasks Henry with doing her errands, and in return she'll let him leave the studio. Being a true friend, Boris sits in the elevator and doesn't help at all. It's probably a good thing Boris didn't help Alice, because at the end of the chapter she repays them by dropping the elevator.
Now come down and bring me back my forest! It's the most perfect forest I've ever seen, and I want it! I need its inside, so I can be beautiful again!
The chapter ends with the elevator crashing and Alice dragging Boris away. In Chapter 4, Henry sets out to save Boris. Henry is unable to save Boris before Alice guts him and turns him into Brute Boris, a monstrous version of the once friendly wolf. At the end of the chapter, Henry enters the haunted house to save Boris, but he's too late.
Boris! No, what has she done to you?
Meet the new and improved Boris! I took what I wanted, and in return, I gave him so much more! And this time, there's no ink demon, no escape. Boris, tear him apart! Leave nothing!
During the boss fight, Brute Boris will eventually start to bleed ink, and Henry can use this to create a gent pipe or a plunger from the ink maker. After hitting Boris once, he'll start using jumping attacks against Henry. When hitting Boris for a second time, Brute Boris will start to grab cards from the haunted house and throw them at Henry. A third and final attack takes Boris down for good.
Why can't you ever just die?
Boris's fate is incredibly tragic, and I remember it being really upsetting when Chapter 4 released. In the Chapter 5 audio log teasers, Henry mentions Boris and expresses guilt about not being able to save him.
Times like this, I wish Boris was still with me. He didn't say much, Boris, but he was a good friend to have. I miss him. I just couldn't save him.
Towards the end of Chapter 5, inside the giant ink machine, Henry finds an inky Boris, and this might be Boris being reborn after he died in Chapter 4. Bendy the Ink Machine ends with Henry playing the end reel and resetting the cycle, and the events of the game happen all over again. After the events of Bendy and the Ink Machine, Joey dies and his friend Nathan Arch buys the Bendy brand to continue his legacy. Nathan's company, Archcape Pictures, takes all the Bendy items from Joey's apartment, which includes the ink machine that created the cycle. Nathan's son Wilson notices the ink machine and begins to investigate it. Wilson enters the cycle, and using his creations known as the Keepers, he disrupts the story from Bendy and the Ink Machine. In Bendy and the Dark Revival, Boris is still alive due to the cycle's events being altered. However, Boris sadly isn't in the game much. Boris can be seen walking towards Heavenly Toys at the start of the game, and he goes into the same vent from Chapter 3 of Bendy and the Ink Machine. Later in Chapter 4, Boris can be seen crawling through the vents of the Gent Workshop, and that's all Boris' appearances in this game. While I'm very disappointed with the lack of Boris in this game, we are getting a big update to Bendy Lone Wolf, which will add a story conclusion to the game, so I'll be sure to take a look at that in the future. At the end of Bendy and the Dark Revival, Audrey resets the cycle and seems to take control of it, but Gent takes the machine, so the future is uncertain. Upcoming games include Bendy the Cage, Bendy 3, and Silent City. Bendy the Cage is about Henry escaping the Keeper's prison and coming to help Audrey at the end of Bendy and the Dark Revival. It's possible we could see Henry and Boris reunite in the cage. It'd be a nice moment after Henry failed to save Boris. Boris could also appear in Bendy 3, which is the conclusion of the main Bendy storyline. Silent City is another upcoming Bendy game, but one that doesn't have a clear placement in the story. Regardless, it's very likely that Boris will appear in it. We know for certain that Boris will be in the non-canon Dreams Come to Life graphic novel, so we can look forward to that. While Boris' role in the series is unclear for now, I hope we see him return as a main character. If you liked this video, I have more Bendy content on my channel. If you're a fan of horror games, I also have Five Nights at Freddy's and Poppy Playtime videos. If you want to help fund future content, please consider donating to our Ko-Fi. Thanks for watching, and check out some of my other videos.